Here we go.
You didn't want to load a full mag, so that's what you got.
No, I did not want to load a full mag.
Here, I'll take a picture of you with it.
Hi, Misha here, and a couple of things have recently happened. For one, Arsenal finally got in some more SAM 7Ks. Specifically, this is the SAM 7K 44 variant with the pick rail in the back. And they're even offering with JMac folding braces with the tail hook adapter on it. This one's stiff apparently. There you go. It's a stabilizing arm brace. So that's great that these are finally back in stock, because it's a really cool gun that's 100% import aside from the brace. But for many years, these were on the market and they didn't do very well. And the brace is actually the reason. So on top of that, being kind of topical, there's been a lot of news about braces lately. Now over on my personal channel, I already did a black box talk, giving my first impressions and opinions. This is more of a arm brace appreciation video, talking about how they've really improved things, shooting safety, shooting comfort, and just kind of made pistols like these viable, whereas before they were not. So we're going to look at the evolution of the brace, how it kind of has been implemented, what we did before them, and if they are banned, what our options might be after them. So with that, let's just dive in as always. SAM 7K. High power. And be held open. Huh? Alright, those two shooting clips might seem completely unconnected and even jarring at first, but think about it. Guns like these, my high power, and this C96 broom handle, are kind of the far distant ancestors of our modern braced pistols. These didn't take a brace, but they were slotted for a stock that was quick detaching and that did double duty as the holster. Wasn't the best stock in the world, but there was a trend there really kind of starting a little before World War I, and it was dying out before World War II, and that kind of killed it. Now this is legal to have with its stock on because it's been so-called grandfathered in. In 1934, the National Firearms Act, the NFA, set up the Class 3 system amongst many other things, restricting machine guns and creating SBR's short-barreled rifles and SBS's short-barreled shotguns. If a rifle or shotgun had a barrel under 18 inches, it had to be registered as a short barrel, or it could not have any type of shoulder stock device, or later on interpreted as vertical foregrip, meaning that it needed to be a pistol. This is why you see post-war high powers lacking the slot, although some would keep the adjustable tangent sights for a while. I don't know, I just kind of thought it was an interesting thing, and it shows how they got banned and all that stuff, and where this whole thing started, because without the NFA, we wouldn't need or want or have arm braces today. It'd be a whole different thing. But let's skip forward a bit. The 1950s and 60s, a lot of Old West, Wild West guns were popular. Military guns, especially modern style, were not. They only started to get a little bit of popularity with the new generation in the late 70s and early 80s. But then, the 80s started to roar, And shows like Miami Vice made a lot of new guns popular. Guns like these. Go. First shots. Tech 9.
Clear.
The Tech 9, the Mac 10, and some others were sold as pistols in the 80s and early 90s, but still most were carbines. I could have brought out the Uzi as an example, but I decided to bring out my all-time favorite, the Blastech E11, or if you prefer, the Sterling Mark IV, or technically Mark VI. These had working underfolding stocks, pistol grips, but to comply with the NFA, they had a extended 16-inch barrel instead of the 7.8-inch machine gun barrel. Now, I said 16, and earlier I said 18. That's because the regulations were amended, and the required barrel length was reduced by 2 inches in this time period, but only for rifles, not for shotguns. So we start to see things like, this carbine, the Uzi, the HK-94, and tactical guns, or MSRs, were getting popular. But in 1989, imports of such guns were banned, and then in 1994, domestic production was halted thanks to the crime bill, the federal assault weapons ban. And so this put pause on things until that would sunset in September of 2004. Sadly, the 89 import ban is still in effect today, over 30 years later. But now we're kind of getting into the modern world and modern market that would spawn the Armbrace. M56, first shots.
Top eject, huh?
SA-26. Honestly, around the time I started my business, the military style guns were really becoming very popular, and some were built from parts kits in the USA, or even completely new manufacturer, and others were imported, like these. This is the IO, later Pioneer PPS 43C, and this was really cool. Keep in mind, when this was coming in 2010, we didn't know what we knew today, and I was actually technically the first just actual dealer, not distributor, but dealer, to get them and start selling them, and I was actually the first to find a problem with them. But either way, these were imported from Poland, and they were able to keep the 10-inch barrel, an original Shroud, and even have the top folding stock intact by simply deactivating it. Before this, you didn't see a lot of deactivated stocks on guns, but later, since this was approved for import by the ATF, which is a pretty high standard to meet, a lot of parts kits builders would kind of start doing the same, and while you don't have use of the stock, it at least preserves the correct original look. And for a gun like this, that's shooting Tokarev and is relatively heavy and has this nice magwell, it's quite shootable as is. But still, sometimes we would either SBR, easy enough, or make them into carbines like I did with this 4352 to add the wood stock, because I thought the wood stocked variant was unique. So once I did that, and I didn't want to make it an extended barrel, I had to add a muzzle extension to the existing barrel. It's perfectly legal to screw one on using the barrel threads and simply pin and weld it or some other form of permanent attachment. So that was a way around where we could have a stock. So basically, at this point, 2009, 2010, your options are SBR, or have a non-functioning stock or no stock at all, or have a barrel brought out to 16 inches. Now, the whole rifle part doesn't have to be 16 inches, but the overall barrel from tip to tip has to be 16 inches. Again, this is still pre-arm brace, but it really was important, Because while this was shootable as a pistol, a lot of guns, especially larger calibers, were not. A good example, the Swiss SIG SG553R, imported as a pistol with a 12-inch barrel, firing 7.62 by 39. It was not a fun thing to shoot as a pistol for oh so many reasons. So here's a before and after from when we converted it from pistol to carbine by installing an extension. And yeah. SG553R. SG553 carbine. Extending the barrel effectively on that 553R so we could install the stock changed how it shot 100%. As a pistol, it was not comfortable and certainly was not aimable, and it actually had strange recoil. You put a stock on it, it becomes very controllable, very soft, very easy to aim. And as I said, it had a 12-inch barrel. And I don't mind extending 12, 13-inch barrels. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. But I don't think when you do that, it looks horrible. And I brought out what I thought were a couple of good examples of guns that had to be extended to make the thing. This is the XM177E2 from Troy. Since the original 177 had this long moderator anyway, it's only a little bit extended. It's about a 12-inch barrel. It looks pretty good. Here is the SetMe LC. It has a 12.5-inch barrel, and Mark Omar did a really good job of combining the flash hider with the extension to make it look very seamless. Again, not something I would want, but I don't think they look terrible. But my rule of thumb has always been 12 inches or more. Okay, there's probably a joke to be made there. Moving on. Between that and 10 inches was kind of a gray area for me. Under 10 inches, though, which is most all of your submachine guns, I felt extensions looked ridiculous. I used to call them sticky yaddy barrels, and that's actually what prevented me from buying an HK94 and several others for many years. It was kind of a running joke amongst my family and friends that I did not buy sticky yaddy barrels. There is another reason that you also might want to preserve the stock instead of doing an arm brace. SetMe LC. Sometimes with historic / collecting guns like these, even if you could put a brace on this LC, and definitely could for this XM, doing so would kind of wreck the looks, because this stock is actually the most unique part of this gun, and this metal Car 15 stock, it too is pretty synonymous with the gun. So even today, you still might want to do an extended barrel, just as with this LC, to kind of preserve the overall look. It is a trade-off, as with everything else in life. But by this point, we have braces. But the early ones, well, they're not what we have today. So let's kind of look at how they've changed over the years. And we have a clip, or clips, from when we were working with the first mini Barils, where Jay actually has one of the early braces, early, and puts it on there temporarily. So that'll give you a good look at that. And we'll move from that point forward. Very first shots out of the very first mini Baril by Jay.
So, a lot of people have complained about the rear trunnion on these, and I think it's interesting to note, maybe for the youngins out there, that for a long time AK pistols did not have any kind of consideration for stock or brace. So back in the day, back in my day, many years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, We had to use this thing called an SB47 brace, which was the thing that slipped in under the grip here and then stuck to the back end. This was, the SB47 was kind of the first thing that came along that was like that. And they were sold by Century, and they came, a lot of them came with the M92 PV, because again, those had no considerations for any kind of brace or stock.
And the same goes with the Dracos back then.
Dracos as well. Yep, I was just about to say that. So a lot of mini Dracos, Draco pistols, full-size Dracos, micro Dracos, all that stuff, none of them had any kind of considerations. So we're only a couple of years after that, and now we have the mini barrel that also has no consideration. And of course, you can see there's a gap here because there's no, there's this little bar here for the sling. So there's a whole cottage industry around making these guns work with a stock or a brace adapter. So I just wanted to call that out before I started shooting it, because you can see this old school M92 PV.
This is why you never throw things away, kids.
Right, yeah. SB47, that's what it was called. So we're chambered up here. I'm going to take a few shots.
What ammo is this?
This is Wolf ammo. Louder than that 9mm.
Oh, yeah.
So we are clear. Bolt hold open on the hammer. Front handguard, it feels a little bit loose now. But other than that, everything is secure, just real oily.
Yeah, that front handguard, the pin runs through the front in the barrel, but what keeps it in the back is just a leaf spring.
Yeah.
But I think it's mostly because the military puts the quad rails on.
It's not too bad. I mean, it's just, it's...
Mine's loose, too.
Yeah.
A little bit up and down play.
Yeah, so I'm going to go zip this sling loop off and mount that a little more securely. Later on, I'll add something else on there.
Yeah. Well, not bad for first rounds.
No.
Now I'll try the mini Burrito as a true pistol. I will say, thanks to the muzzle device and this ergonomic grip, as far as shooting it as a true pistol, I've shot a lot worse.
Yep.
I did find one of the old school pistol extensions / brace extensions. It's that thick diameter. There's no locking. This is basically just a screw into the back of an AR receiver, tighten it down, and slide your brace on. And it's way too thick to let a stock go on, and of course it's not notched at all. That was generation 1 though, and today we might look back and laugh or even think they were ugly, but in 2012 it's ahead of the curve. But as with anything, well, the industry would push it forward, especially after 2014, 2015. So let's kind of skip to our next generation of Armbraces. Uzi Pro. Little jackhammer. So back out here with my trusty old Uzi Pro. And the original braces, as we talked about, were kind of chunky pieces of rubber that fit on commercial oversized pistol tubes, and they were fixed, and they were primarily intended for AR-15s, but of course you could put them on AKs and other things, and people started to. Now the Uzi Pro is essentially a modern take on the original Uzi pistol from the 80s and early 90s, but that had no anything in the back, and so it was actually very not fun to shoot. And even though it was a heavy gun firing 9mm, maybe 45 or 41 Action Express, they like to do this thing where they would twist in your hands because of the torque in the barrel. Having a stabilizing arm brace, well, it stabilizes so that you have a point of contact to kind of counteract that twist, meaning that you're more on target, less likely to have it twist out of your hands, drop it, other unsafe activities. I brought this one out because it still has a pretty old school rubber brace on it. But with this, we start to see the folding braces appear. If I can do it on camera, these are always really stiff, and it's not a bad thing. There we go. It's only taken like 10 years to let that thing be relatively loose. Now, the idea of this folding is so you could store it. Perfectly logical. And that was kind of our next step forward. Folding braces, but still on oversized pistol tubes and still having pretty just fixed, chunky rubber arm braces. Alrighty, SP5.
Pretty smooth.
And that's with Tula too, so even cycles Tula. After the folding arm brace, the market really would open up. We'd start to see all kinds of different models, types, and flavors. Many made specifically for either a certain gun or a certain style of gun. And of course, this HK SP5 is a great example of where a brace really looks at home, doing things to allow to have collapsing braces. I'll set you down. And even ones that have adjustable positioning. In fact, these are amongst the first adjustable length arm braces because, well, we have different lengths arms, don't we? Yeah. Looks appropriate. Doesn't look like the stock, but it looks appropriate on this type of gun and makes shooting a lot more interesting. TP9 with folding brace. Held on.
Your lens cover was on.
Oh dear.
That was it, huh? Doesn't take much of a rack, does it?
Nope. Pretty short throw. We're gonna let J-Ro try the SCW.
Man, that is really soft shooting.
Yeah, it is.
It's actually not even all that loud. I mean, like my ear pro wasn't quite all the way in, and that was actually totally comfortable.
Back out here. 1 AK, 1 AR pistol. Actually, these are really good because this is a 10-inch barrel, give or take, and this is just over 10 inches too. And I wanted to kind of talk about the modern arm brace, at least the SB tactical style that we kind of began with. Let's set this one for a second. This is the kind of still skinny version, the 3. Now they're adjustable. The only real kind of rule or consideration, you don't want a length of pull, a distance between over 13 inches to keep it as a quote-unquote pistol. But we are on a standard spec tube now with the adjustment notches, which is frankly great. When I first built a Mark 18 eons ago, before the brace was a thing, you didn't have a lot of options. Basically, you just had to have a pistol tube back here, and with a rubber foam wrap around it. That was basically meant to be a cheek rest. Since an AR has to have a receiver extension, a tube, no matter what, you had that sticking out. So kind of de facto, you had something to kind of lean up on to give a point of contact with an AR pistol, just by default in the natural action. This is, by the way, the SBA 4 style, the kind of more bulky, but kind of reminds me of a SOP mod stock a little bit. See, there's not a ton of adjustment there, but at least it gives you a little collapsing. This is a much better option than just a pistol tube with a wrap around it, though. Really is. And it's infinitely more practical, too. My only real gripe about doing this with an AK is you don't need a receiver extension. Like Jay talked about when he was putting it on the the mini barrel, the old school ones clamped around the grip and came out the back and just sat there. That's fine for a more modern tactical looking gun like this, or the mini barrel, but you have a tube here that basically is doing nothing. It's just a hollow tube for the sake of. And that kind of gets us back to where we began this video. Mark 18. Now we'll get the gun in J-Ro's hands. Oh, the concussion. I could hear that it held open too.
Yeah, sure did. Man, it's thumpy, but it doesn't climb at all.
No, it's...
No, follow-up shots are real easy.
Yeah. An arm brace looks perfectly at home on most, if not all, AR-15s, and even many other similar modern guns like the HKs. Just a quick comparison with that Daniel Defense and my Colt is having the SOP mod stock, this having the SB brace. They don't look the same, but they have a very similar spirit to them. And that lets us keep a 10-inch barrel on this gun. Ironically, the Colt actually has a 14.5-inch barrel. So for it to be legal, it needs this Surefire permanently attached. I don't really have a big problem with permanently attaching things to barrels that are 14, 15 inches, because typically all you have to do is fix the muzzle device in place, as on this one here. And that way you can have the stock and the foregrip. On something like this, even with the brace, it's still a quote-unquote pistol. So putting this foregrip on this rail would be forbidden. So you still have limitations, but not too bad. Yeah, I think these really do mesh well together. And bracing an AR, it just fits. And similar guns like this one. MPX Copperhead. Held open. As the kids would say, the brace might even look dope on guns like that MPX and similar. And again, not half bad on this Zastava M85 because of the tactical thing. But what about guns with a more traditional wood and steel look, like my M92 here with its wood handguards? Yeah, you can put a brace on, but I've always felt it doesn't work. It doesn't give the right aesthetic. So with that, that's still why I installed the underfolding stock here. And because I didn't feel like SBRing it, I installed an extended muzzle device. Unfortunately, because this is a 10-inch barrel, just like the 85, this is noticeable. This is really more extension than I'm comfortable with, but even though it's a close call on my own head, I would rather have this than this combined with wood. I just don't like that appearance. It just seems like the right thing to be on the rear of a Yugo AK. Kind of like I was saying earlier with that Set Me LC. Sometimes you just really need to preserve the shoulder stock, even if it means you have to do something that looks pretty ridiculous like this, in my opinion. But that's kind of what we're about. This is just my appreciation and acknowledgement of the limitations of braces. A gun like this with the night brake and quad rail. By the way, this is a angled vertical grip, which I'm sure most of you are aware of. These are perfectly legal. Yeah, a true vertical grip, that's illegal. This, perfectly fine. Right. My only gripe here is that for a long time when we put these on AKs, we had this fixed, useless tube. And like I said, that gets us back to where this video began and why I think so highly of our arsenal and its bracing system. SAM 7K with S&B brass case. For a lot of non-AR-15 style guns, something like this is kind of ideal. Does this look like an actual AK stock? No. But it looks more like what you would find on kind of a generic AK than the SBA 4 or even the SBA 3. And when not in use, it folds out of the way. So you don't have a tube hanging off the back, essentially taking up space and doing nothing. And when you need to use it, you just deploy it. Again, this is still stiff. And you can go to work. Now, some people prefer the hard tail hook pattern. Notice it's open in the end. While others still prefer the more rubbery, plasticky SB style. I think it kind of depends on the gun. What looks better. This is a little softer, which is nice for heavier recoiling guns. And this is obviously quite decent if you're firing 9mm or lighter recoiling guns, but you may not want 308 with that kind of profile on you, cheek, arm, or shoulder wise. Pretty uncomfortable. But this really is one of the kind of final evolutions of a system that started a decade ago, and it really has become more useful, more versatile, and frankly just better looking. Gal 5 pistol. Held open. Personal taste, personal opinion. If you're needing to brace an AR or something that has a tube, I like the SBA 3 or SBA 4, kind of just depending on which look you're going for. This is the Gal. Even though this has a barrel over 12 inches, which would normally be something I would like to extend out, this looks so good and doesn't compromise functionality, ergonomics, shootability, that I don't mind it at all. And it still lets it still be a few more inches compact. And now with our arsenal, this JMac folding tail hook. You know, being able to have a folding stock was always one of the pros. I'm going to sit you down. Was always one of the pros that AK guys pointed to. And they're not wrong. Because if you can reduce it by 8-10 inches, fold it up for storage, transport, why would you not? Obviously with an AR, we just don't have that option, so it doesn't matter. But if we can have that option, and I also just think the all metal look here, skeletal, it just fits the AK aesthetic, at least for a modern AK like this or the Zastava. It kind of reminds me of a VZ58 Paratrooper stock, if you think about it. Actually, it's a lot like it in the general details. And of course, in the past, you've seen my personal gun with the CNC Warrior adapter. I like it a lot too. This gives it a more minimalist look, and it's actually a little lighter. That's a little bulkier, and of course, I have used different slip-ons on it before. Either way, kind of personal taste at that point. But I still am pretty comfortable with the older guns, AMB 65s, M92s, Crinks, having a stock and just dealing with it. Personal taste. Another one Yeah, that the SIG, the SG series falls in the same thing. They look okay with a brace, but not as good as, frankly, either of these. SG 552. She held up. Right. 553 LB one more time. Held open.
Your lens cap was on.
Oh dear. Have you figured it out yet? Armbrace appreciation video is code for I went through the archives of shooting footage and found pretty much all the types of shooting we have done with braces over the years, or kind of relevant secondary stuff. I just thought it'd be fun to document because we really have had a lot of trigger time with several taps, including shockwaves. You know, even shotguns have received the brace treatment, although the rules and regs and things around shotguns are a little weird and a little different today versus rifles.
Good?
870 TAC 14 with brace. At any rate, lots of people, millions, maybe tens of millions, are enjoying these. But what if they disappear? If you can no longer put a brace, what's the next option? What can we do?
The muzzle blast is present.
PM63. There we go. We would be back to where we were in 2009, 2010. But at least we wouldn't be back to where we were in 1994. And for longer barrel guns like this AMD 65, 12.5 inches, I would just do an extension. Then you would have a working and actually still very stiff stock on mine, and we could retain the foregrip. And since we're using the big honkin' AMD brake anyway, really we're only having to extend it about 2.5 inches, kind of the same tactic we used with that SIG 553R. Sometimes you have to be a little clever to make extensions that don't look too bad. Again, if it fits in with the aesthetic of the gun, it's better than just being a generic brake that stands out. Other guns can be just kind of kept as pistols, like this PM63, even retaining the underfolding stock in the back, just welded, pinned, closed. Doesn't do anything. This is small enough and light enough, you really can just use it as a pistol. The same kind of goes for the Scorpion VZ61 that you saw in our recent GoldenEye video. So the problem really comes back to those pesky guns with 6 to 10 inch barrels. That's the problem range. Under 6 inches, which is right around, you can usually get away with just making it a pistol, maybe even having a faux stock. And like I said, over 11 or 12 inches, yeah, just make an extension. It's not the worst in the world, and enjoy your stock. Yeah, so this is the target area. Now, of course, the obvious answer is SBR it. Perfectly valid. But you're paying $200, and you're giving lots of information to the government, and you're waiting, and you can't just go from state to state with an SBR without a form giving you travel permission. And on top of that, there are several states where SBRs are not allowed or are just almost impossible to get. So let's just set that aside and talk about what can we do if braces go away. POF, full size. we would be back to being forced to put giant, long extensions on our guns. Just like we were in the 80s and before 2012. Could I have picked another gun to bring back? Yeah, but I told you the Sterling's my favorite, so why not? And it's a good example of one small way to make a sticky Eddie barrel not quite as ugly. You can add a barrel shroud. They look better than a bare barrel, and they have moderate functionality by protecting you from the barrel's heat. This is from E&L. Really like it. Another thing, if you have something that came into the country as a pistol, this came in as carbine, and it has a short barrel, you can attach a faux suppressor. Does it look great? No. Does it look better than just a barrel extension just sticking out there? I think so. I think this one was from MFI, if memory serves. It works, and it actually uses the 3-lug. The nice thing about these methods, at least they don't impact functionality. It's a ugly thing, but it still retains a working stock, grip, full sights, all of that. So in some ways, it's still fewer compromisers than a arm brace. This kind of goes to show you. But to be fair, we've always had some guns that could not be braced in the first place. Now J-Bro with the CX4. I know it looks ridiculous with this barrel. I still like my Beretta CX4 a lot. In fact, that shooting footage was from very recently. It was fresh shooting footage. I wanted J-Ro to try it out. You just can't really brace this because of how the stock in action. This isn't a bullpup, but it still has components. It's all one piece. There's no real way to do it. And speaking of bullpups, that's another one. I've heard people kind of make jokes and say things about putting the spike on a butt plate of a bullpup to make it a non-shoulderable thing, but the truth is, there's really not a way to brace a bullpup that I'm aware of. So that means things like the FNPS 90 or Tavor X95 need 16-inch barrels. And oftentimes another crutch there when you're doing carbines for those is overall length. But I digress. I'm just pointing out the fact that we still have guns today, as nice as braces are, that just can't take advantage of them. And we do have some that can, but for cosmetic reasons, shouldn't. Some guns look hideous with a brace on. You know what I'm talking about. Imagine like a World War II Sten build, or, oh, even worse, a Thompson. A 1928 A1 Thompson, classic wood, machined steel, gorgeous blue, and then a hunk of rubber on the rear. Ugh, I'm blind and that makes me shiver me timbers. I was trying to think of the ugliest braced pistol I own or could put together quickly, and I came up with this. Yeah, throw that old school tube, non-folding, onto a VZ61. The other thing that make this look even worse, wood grips instead of the polymer. And this is just not terribly functional. Gives you a little bit of bracing, but it makes the gun twice as long if it folded. Anyway, this is kind of being funny here for a minute, but let's have a palate cleanser before we go. Alright, let's try the Ace Rock and Lock again. It really doesn't have any climb. Get your held open again.
Is it punchy?
No, not really.
Yeah, kind of smooth shooting.
Smoother than I thought, and very little climb, and pretty gentle recoil. Probably a lot of it has to do with the brace, the not stock. And this really is one of my favorites. In fact, I sometimes think this IWI brace on the Ace pistol here looks better than the SBR version with the IWI stock. I don't know. It's funny as this is literally the exact same brace that was on this gun a second ago. But it just goes to show if the aesthetic, if the design of the brace fits the overall aesthetic of the gun, it melds well together. And if it doesn't, it stands out like a sore thumb. So braces are really great, but not perfect, and I just wanted to put them in perspective. Let's close this out. Mini Jack, last mag of the, well, almost night now. And it shoots.
And then some.
Well, really appreciate you tuning in, hanging out. Again, if you're interested in more of a talk about the laws and my thoughts, I did put out a black box on my personal channel. It's not really what this channel's about. This is just more about enjoying something together and sharing things. But for what it's worth, these don't need to go away. They're not being used in crimes. They're not being used by criminals. They have been legally owned for over a decade by tens of millions of Americans, and they make guns safer and easier to shoot by people with disabilities, myself included. Keep in mind that was the whole original purpose behind, and they still serve today. They also open up a whole different class of gun that was just really not worthwhile before we had something, because this is a pistol. It's too big and bulky, and therefore it's not fun or even perhaps all that safe to shoot. This is a great safety feature, and it's just a great shooting feature. And so that's why it seemed like a good time to do an arm brace appreciation video. So we'd love to talk about what braced guns you might have. There's a lot of them out there now. It's a very popular thing. In all kinds of calibers, stripes, all, you know, old guns, new guns, any guns. It's been a lot of fun, really has. With that, if you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, there's a link to the Patreon page, as always, below. This is Misha, and we'll catch you very soon next time.